This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. East Coast fever kills hundreds of thousands of cattle in eastern and central Africa every year. The animals become infected when they get bitten by ticks carrying the parasite that causes the disease. A parasite is an organism that feeds on other organisms. Donald Knowles directs the Animal Disease Research Unit in the Agricultural Research Service, part of the United States Department of Agriculture. The service is working with the International Livestock Research Institute in Kenya to find better ways to prevent parasitic diseases in cattle. Dr. Knowles is also a professor at Washington State University. He points out that East Coast fever is not a contagious disease, so animals cannot give it to each other. You need a tick to transmit from one infected cow to the other. They won't transmit just by standing next to each other. You need a tick to move it between them. Farmers in parts of Africa use a vaccination method against East Coast fever known as infect and treat. First, they infect animals with live parasites. Then, they treat them with drugs to help them recover. That way, explains Dr. Knowles, the animal becomes immunized or vaccinated against a full case of the deadly fever. But there are problems with this method of vaccination. Uninfected ticks that bite the vaccinated animal can still get infected and spread the parasite to other animals. Dr. Knowles says once a cow is infected with this parasite, all the data indicates that the cow stays infected for life. That means that cow, even a cow that has been vaccinated, now it's protected against the disease, but it can still transmit. See, it's infected for life. And so that animal is still a source of transmission. And there are other problems with this method of vaccination. One of the things in using live vaccines is that they usually require cold storage, and that adds to the cost of it, and also adds to the difficulty of using it in places like Africa. For more than 4 years, American and Kenyan scientists have studied diseases carried by ticks. The scientists in the United States centered their work on the parasite that causes Texas cattle fever. This fever is common to the Americas. This year, the scientists began a new study in Africa. The study is aimed at developing a new vaccine for the East Coast fever parasite. Dr. Knowles says their goal is a vaccine that does not require infecting and treating animals or the need for cold storage. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. New studies have found that a chemical commonly used to fight plant disease is harming honeybees. Experts say the chemical may be partly to blame for the widespread loss of honeybees in the United States. The insects are important to farmers. When a honeybee lands on a flowering plant, pollen sticks to its legs. When the bee lands on another flower, some of the pollen falls off and fertilizes the second plant. The act of pollination is important to the growth of many fruits, vegetables, nuts, and other crops. Yet, about 30% of honeybees in the United States and other areas have died in recent years. Dennis Van Engelsdorp is a researcher at the University of Maryland. He wants to learn why so many bees are dying. His research team examined pollen grains that honeybees carried to their hives. They found that the pollen contained high levels of 35 different pesticides, chemicals used to kill insects. They also found that bees that ate some fungicides became infected with a deadly microorganism called Nosema. Fungicides are used to protect against fungi and are widely used for agriculture purposes in the United States. Mike Leggett studies pesticides for the pest management industry group Crop Life America. He says many of the pesticides found in the pollen examined by Dennis Van Engelsdorp actually protect bees from Nosema. Honeybees are important to agriculture. This makes the search for an answer to their deaths especially urgent for Mr. Van Engelsdorp's team. As he notes, 1 in every 3 bites of food we eat is somehow pollinated by honeybees. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. The pressure to feed Asia's growing population has led to dangerous levels of overfishing near Pacific coastlines. An example can be found in Sindangan, a fishing town in the southern Philippines. Wild catches are falling while prices are rising. One fisherman says the area's once healthy fish stocks are in danger because of an increase in the number of fishing boats. Across the South China Sea, fish catches near shore have dropped since the 1980s. That drop has pushed fishermen farther offshore and into bigger boats. An official with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, says some fishing methods are destructive. Benjamin Francisco says the use of fine mesh nets or explosives catch young fish before they can ever reproduce. This hurts fish stocks. The fish warden in Sindangan says most of the local fishermen use fine mesh nets, but these nets have been banned for years because they catch very young fish. To deal with problems like this, the FAO has been supporting the idea of licensing systems. The aim is to limit the number of fishing boats on the water. Asia has the world's largest fishing fleets. They represent nearly 3 million of the world's 4 million fishing vessels, and most estimates say that the numbers are increasing. In Hong Kong, there are increased efforts to supervise fleets and to ban trawling for fish near shore. More than $200 million is being spent in an effort to increase catches by small fishing operations. But Hong Kong's measures are costly. FAO official Benjamin Francisco says a lot of governments in Asia do not have enough money or the ability to copy them. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Farming without big machines is hard work. Planting and fertilizing alone can take days in the hot sun. Researchers are working to develop simple machines to make life easier for farmers in the developing world. They would also like to help the farmers save money. Jelle van Loon is testing a model of a handheld planting tool designed for small-scale farmers. It is a long metal hoe with just 2 flat teeth. With each stroke, one tooth plants a seed, the other adds a little fertilizer. Jelle van Loon is not a farmer. He is an engineer at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center in Mexico. Mr. van Loon is working to develop low-cost tools for small-scale farmers around the world. He hopes the tools will save them work, time, and money. Usually, he starts with a piece of equipment built somewhere else. An example is a hand planter from Brazil. The long wooden V-shaped tool has a piece of metal on the bottom for breaking up the soil. Opening the arms of a part shaped like the letter V loads seed and fertilizer into the metal tip. This tool is faster and costs less than planting by hand. It uses less seed and fertilizer. It can also reduce by half the time required for planting and fertilizing a 2-hectare farm. The planter still costs about $200 to make. Jelle van Loon thinks the final product will cost less. However, he says more work is needed. His team is now testing their 4th version of the planter. Mr. van Loon says the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center will publish plans for the tool on the internet after the group has finished its work. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. One of the great American success stories after World War II was the rise of industrial farming. But now, small is big. People who say they worry about their food and their environment are looking for locally grown produce from small farms. Local meat producers want a piece of the action. But small farmers often have a difficult time getting their animals to market. Many cannot pay the cost of a large slaughterhouse. Also, the number of slaughterhouses in the United States has decreased sharply since the 1980s. Some small farmers have to travel long distances to have their animals killed and processed. But now, if a farmer cannot get to the slaughterhouse may come to the farmer. The United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, is helping farmers to pay for and operate mobile slaughter units. These are trucks and trailers equipped to do the job, including inspection. A federal inspector travels with the unit. Last September, the USDA announced a $65 million program called Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. The aim is to support local farmers, rural communities, and healthy eating. As part of that effort, officials are trying to spread the word about mobile slaughter units. 10 years ago, in Washington state, 15 farmers raising sheep and other livestock formed a cooperative. Their group, the Island Grown Farmers Cooperative, wanted to build a traditional slaughterhouse, but neighbors objected. So, the farmers designed a slaughterhouse on wheels. The Department of Agriculture approved the first mobile slaughter unit in 2002. There are now 44 farmers in that cooperative. And mobile units are being used around the country, not just for sheep and cattle. A group in Alaska uses a mobile slaughterhouse for reindeer. And an organization in South Dakota has a mobile unit for buffalo. The United States has a limited number of federal meat inspectors. Some farm co-ops operate with state inspectors. But red meat and meat that will be sold in other states must have federal inspection. Right now, officials say 9 groups are operating federally approved mobile units. They say these slaughterhouses on wheels are not only a way to build local food systems, but also to help local economies. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. For more reports, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Farmers may not be able to prevent natural disasters, but they can at least try their best to reduce losses. For example, they can plant crops that are more likely to survive extreme weather. In north-central Vietnam, people with small farms do not plant rice between September and December. Seasonal rains might destroy the rice, so instead they plant lotus seeds on raised beds. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says the lotus seeds bring a good price in local markets. Farmers in the Philippines are showing new interest in crops like winged beans, string beans, arrowroot, and cassava. The Asian Disaster Preparedness Center says traditional crops like these can survive the fierce storms that often strike the islands. The United Nations says some African farmers grow Bambara groundnuts during long, dry periods. The seeds of this drought-resistant plant can be boiled for eating or for making flour. In some parts of the world, farmers grow vetiver grass. Researchers in Thailand wrote about vetiver in 2007 in the journal Science Asia. They noted that the grass can absorb and control the spread of harmful wastewaters, like those from pig farms. Agricultural expert William Rivera says vetiver resists difficult conditions. It reduces damage from heavy rains. And vetiver planted on earthen dams may strengthen them against breaks and flooding. William Rivera also speaks approvingly of alfalfa. Its deep roots can find and take up groundwater. Those roots also help hold the soil against winds. And alfalfa can be a valuable food source for animals. The deep and extensive roots of sunflowers make them another good candidate for resisting extreme conditions. The tall plants have brightly colored heads that provide seeds and oil. North Dakota grows more hectares of sunflowers than any other American state. But North Dakota is better known as a top wheat-producing state. Hans Kandel works at the North Dakota State University Extension Service in Fargo. He says farmers in some parts of North Dakota plant wheat that is ready to harvest in only about 100 days. That way, it can grow before the hot, dry months of July through September. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can find captioned videos of our reports along with transcripts and MP3s at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also post questions and comments.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Iron deficiency anemia is the most common nutritional disorder in the world. People with the condition do not have enough red blood cells. As the name suggests, iron deficiency anemia results from a lack of iron. The World Health Organization says half the pregnant women and about 40% of preschool children in developing countries are not getting enough iron. Anemic adults cannot work to their full ability, and pregnant women who are anemic have a greater risk of problems during childbirth. Michael Hambidge of the University of Colorado is an expert on child health issues. He says the effects of anemia on children can be permanent. In a new study, Dr. Hambidge and others suggest that new kinds of grain may help reduce iron deficiency. They tested flour made from a special kind of pearl millet. The researchers used traditional crop breeding methods to increase the amount of iron in the pearl millet. The process is called biofortification. Researchers in India prepared meals with flour made from the biofortified millet. They used the meals to feed 21 children who had low iron levels. Then they compared these children to 19 others who received similar meals without the biofortified flour. The researchers found that children who ate the high iron millet meals satisfied their daily requirements for the mineral. The other children did not. Experts say millet is a good crop to reach those in need of iron because it usually costs less to grow than other grains. It also requires little rainfall. The first high iron biofortified pearl millet is already on the market in India. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A discovery in a laboratory could help lead to a new generation of drought-resistant crops. Drought conditions cause plants to produce a stress hormone called abscisic acid. This chemical activates a set of protein molecules called receptors. These receptors then activate a series of changes to help the plant survive. The natural reaction of the receptors is to close so-called guard cells on and inside the leaves. That closure decreases water loss and stops the plant from growing to save water during a drought. Researchers say they have discovered a way to supercharge or increase this reaction. Sean Cutler at the University of California, Riverside led the team. The scientists engineered abscisic acid receptors that can be turned on at will and stay on. They tested hundreds of versions of engineered receptor genes until they found ones that worked right together. The team worked with Arabidopsis, a plant often used in experiments. The results recently appeared in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Professor Cutler says testing the new receptors in the field may take several years. He also points out that drought is not the only cause of plant stress. What would be stressful for a crop plant is not stressful for a cactus, for example, because the cactus has evolved to live in dry deserts. In another development, scientists have produced a new system for analyzing genetic markers in rice plants. A genetic marker is a DNA sequence with a known location. It can help scientists identify nearby genes linked to individual qualities or traits. Anna McClung and Georgia Eisinga are genetic scientists with the United States Department of Agriculture. Their new system will let researchers genetically fingerprint rice varieties and gain a better understanding of the markers. Until now, breeders have been limited to using perhaps 200 markers. But modern technology lets scientists identify differences throughout the plant's genome, its genetic map. Ms. McClung says that means the ability to identify new genes that control biological pathways. These pathways in the plant may control traits like yield, disease resistance, and nutritional quality. The finding could make it easier in the future for farmers to grow designer rice, rice bred to meet their specific needs. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Read, listen, and learn English and much more with our programs and activities at voaspecialenglish.com. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Straw bale gardening is a way to grow food above the ground. Straw is what remains of plant stems after grain is harvested. The long, dry tubes are gathered into bales. Bales are often about a meter long and half a meter high and wide. Straw is different from hay. Hay is made from whole plants and used to feed animals. Straw is used mostly for animal bedding. Joel Karsten wrote a book called Straw Bale Gardens. He says this ancient and increasingly popular idea is a form of container gardening. He says using containers makes gardening easier by reducing the need to pull weeds and deal with insect problems. Joel Karsten says straw bales can require less water and prevent plant diseases caused by too much water in the soil. He says it is not possible to overwater a bale of straw because all the extra water just runs out the bottom. In areas with polluted soil, growing food in straw bales is easier than building above-ground containers for soil. Oats and wheat are the most commonly baled grains in the United States. Rice straw is also good for baling and gardening. The straw bale becomes both the container and the growing material. Preparing the bale takes about 2 weeks. The first step is to add water and fertilizer to the center of the bale every day for 3 days. This begins the process of bacteria breaking down the straw into a growing medium. Once this happens, the bales are ready for seeds or young plants. Some experts say planting seedlings is better than growing from seeds. You can find plenty of information about straw bale gardening on the internet. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Students at the University of Virginia have developed a new way to purify water. They say it could bring improved water quality to millions of people in the developing world. They call it a Madi drop. Field testing began recently in South Africa. The laboratory where the Madi drop is made operates like a kitchen. Workers add ingredients and mix, weigh, press, and bake. What the workers are making is a ceramic disc that contains silver. When the disc is dropped into water, silver ions are released to purify the water. Ions are atoms that have an electrical charge. Testing at the University of Virginia shows that the disc produces clean, safe water. Bita Ade studies at the University of Virginia. She says her work is not only about making effective technology, it is also about making solutions for people in developing countries who do not have many resources. Why the name Madi drop? The word Madi means water in Tshivenda, a language of Limpopo province in South Africa. There, 50 women run a factory that makes water filters. The university started the factory last summer. The women mix sawdust and clay to make flower pot-shaped filters that they use to purify drinking water. The water flows through the filters, which trap bacteria and solid particles. The factory sells the filters to local families. But the Madi drop is smaller and less expensive than the filters. Over the next few months, students will test the Madi drop in South Africa. If the testing is successful, the South African women will make and sell the Madi drops. The goal is to expand to other developing countries and improve millions of lives. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Today we continue telling about a report by 3 geography experts from American colleges. They studied food security in Gambia, Ivory Coast, and Mali over 30 years. In the 1980s, governments and lenders, like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, changed market policies. They launched free markets designed to improve agriculture. The report, however, suggests that the changes caused loss of important support systems for farmers. Private investment in agriculture largely replaced government help. In some places, roads and mills built to help farmers fell into ruin. Protectionist import taxes and farm supports were cut. Farmers planted more of their best crops, or cash crops, for export. They planted fewer food crops for local use. Less costly rice came into the ports of Gambia and Ivory Coast. Many city people in those countries liked the cheap rice more than rice grown locally. Researcher Judith Carney works at the University of California at Los Angeles. She said buying the cheaper imported rice worked well until the worldwide food crisis of 2008. Then, many people could not pay for an important part of their diet. Researcher Lawrence Becker of Oregon State University said some local farmers stopped farming. Food production fell, and unemployment rose. The researchers said people in Mali were able to deal better with the food crisis. Mali's farmers supplied more of their nation's rice needs than the other 2 countries studied. And the poorest people in Malian cities ate sorghum instead of rice. William Mosley of Macalester College in Minnesota led the report. Professor Mosley said Malian farmers had planted more sorghum because the price of their cotton, a cash crop, had dropped. Unlike Ivory Coast and Gambia, Mali has no seaports. He said this is often seen as a problem for Mali, but it caused them to depend less on imported rice. Based on their research, the experts suggest that farmers plant a variety of crops and not just depend on rice. They also say governments could place some trade barriers. And they urge that mills and roads be built or rebuilt to process and carry grains to market. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. For more agriculture news or to comment on our reports, go to our website, voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A new study says climate change has reduced the world's wheat and maize production. The study says rice and soybean yields have also decreased in some places, but increased in others. In the words of the researchers, for soybeans and rice, winners and losers largely balanced out. The researchers studied climate trends and global crop production from between 1980 and 2008. They found that climate changes are already exerting a considerable drag on yield growth and may have affected food prices. The study used computer models linking crop yields to weather. Yield is the amount produced for each hectare or acre. The researchers compared the results to what the yields might have been without climate changes. They found that corn production decreased by almost 4%, and wheat production decreased by 5.5%. Warming temperatures were reported in almost all of Europe, much of Asia, and some of South America and Africa. During the study period, most countries had greater temperature changes from year to year than they have had historically. But the study says the United States was an important exception, at least so far. Corn and wheat yields in most of North America remained about the same. Russia's wheat yield decreased the most. The largest loss in corn yields were in China and Brazil. The report is in the journal Science. One of the researchers was economist Wolfram Schnenker at Columbia University in New York and the National Bureau of Economic Research. He says the report can serve as a planning tool for policymakers. He says if you are worried about rising food prices, it might be good to funnel some research into breeding for heat tolerance, and maybe even drought tolerance. Jeffrey Stark is with a public policy organization called the Foundation for Environmental Security and Stability. He recently described the effects of climate change on pastoralists in Uganda who travel with their cattle. Many say they have to travel farther in search of pasture and water because of unpredictable changes in seasonal weather patterns. And that search can bring them into conflict with farmers facing problems of their own. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can download MP3s of Special English programs and find English teaching activities at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Mangroves are unusual-looking trees. They have roots that stand in salt water and look like cables or ropes laid one on top of another. Mangroves are not just pretty, they help the environment. But now, the first worldwide study warns that 1 in 6 of the many different kinds of mangroves could disappear. As a result of this study, 11 species of mangrove have been placed on the red list of threatened species. The list is kept by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. The study appeared in the Public Library of Science journal, PLOS One. Lead author Beth Polidoro works for the Global Marine Species Assessment Unit, based at Old Dominion University in Richmond, Virginia. The researchers looked at 70 species of mangrove. They found that all mangrove forests on coastlines are under threat from development, logging, or other dangers. But the areas in worse danger are on the Atlantic and Pacific coasts of Central America. The study says mangrove trees provide more than $1.5 billion worth of services to ecological systems worldwide. For example, areas with mangrove forests were not damaged as badly by the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. Mangrove forests protect land against erosion from wind, water, and storms. They capture and store carbon dioxide, so experts say they can help fight climate change. And they serve as nurseries for shrimp and other saltwater organisms. Beth Polidoro says about 80% of the mangrove area in India and Southeast Asia has disappeared within the past 60 years. Indonesia is said to have lost almost half its mangrove forests within the past 30 years. Burma, also known as Myanmar, has lost many valuable mangrove trees in recent years. In some areas there, monkeys play in the tops of mangroves 30 meters tall, and dolphins swim in the waters of mangrove forests. One of the rarest species of mangrove tree grows in just a few places in East Asia and India. There are estimates that only about 250 mature trees of that species remain. Beth Polidoro says they may disappear within the next 10 years unless action is taken to protect them. She says the good news in the study is that some species of mangrove can be reforested relatively easily, but others are much more difficult to restart. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. This summer, the remains of what had been Hurricane Isaac moved over the American Midwest. The storm brought rain to areas suffering from a severe drought. But the rain came too late to save many farmers' corn and soybean crops. Crop insurance will help limit financial losses, but crop insurance is a tool that is not available to most growers in the developing world. The United States federal government helps pay for the cost of insurance against natural disasters. Not every farmer in America chooses to buy crop insurance. Dick Thompson of Boone, Iowa, says he operates his farm the way farmers did in the past. "I'm old-fashioned, and I'm proud of it," he says. Dick Thompson uses little chemical fertilizer, weed killers, or insecticides. He does not grow genetically modified crops. He says his methods helped him survive the drought, and he says they are already earning him more money per hectare than his neighbors who farm the modern way. Scientists are trying to understand why his methods are working. Matt Liebman has copied many of them in his research fields at Iowa State University. He says he is trying to understand some of the scientific mechanisms that explain the results Dick Thompson observes on his own farm. Many Iowa farms today grow only corn and soybeans. Payments from crop insurance keep farmers in business when their crops do poorly, as in this year's drought. But Dick Thompson says he has never bought crop insurance. Instead, he protects himself by growing other kinds of crops in addition to corn and soybeans. He raises hay and oats, along with cattle and pigs. He harvested his oat crop before the drought hit. He says it's common sense. But now farmers are growing hay on only half as much land as they did 20 years ago. And oat production has fallen by almost 95%. Livestock production has also fallen. Dick Thompson says he will sell some of his cows and hogs, but not all of them. They provide more than money. They also make manure that he uses to fertilize the soil instead of chemical fertilizers. The manure helps the soil hold water. Iowa State University researcher Rick Cruz says that helps crop growth even in drought conditions. And these are the stressful conditions that farmers everywhere might face more often because of climate change. Matt Liebman says his research shows that all farmers can learn from Dick Thompson. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. The University of Georgia is a respected research university. 35,000 students attend the main campus in Athens, Georgia, and extended campuses around the state. And among its areas of research is agriculture. UGA has a center in San Luis de Monteverde in Costa Rica. This center is for students and visitors who want to learn more about farming and living in environmentally friendly ways. Some students take a class called Coffee, from bean to cup. Coffee is Costa Rica's most important agricultural product. Professor Valerie Peters teaches the class. Her students help her study coffee farms in an area called Finca La Beja. Farmers in this area agreed to grow their coffee sustainably, using methods that do less harm to the environment. Most coffee farms in Costa Rica have one or two different kinds of trees to help shade the coffee plants from the sun. In Finca La Beja, most farms have at least 20 kinds of trees. Many of the farmers have also planted more flowers. When there are more flowers and more kinds of trees, more bees will come to pollinate the coffee plants. Coffee plants can pollinate themselves, but bees help increase the harvest. Professor Peters is working with her students to help teach farmers about the importance of bees and having more trees and flowers. She says many of the farmers commented that they never even thought of bees as having a role in their coffee production. Having more species of trees on coffee farms also provides more places for birds to live. If farmers have at least 10 different kinds of trees per hectare, they may be able to have their coffee certified as bird-friendly. This is done by the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center in the United States. Bird-friendly coffee can sell for a higher price. The University of Georgia is also helping farmers in Costa Rica increase their income through tourism. Professor Quaint Newcomer directs this program. He says students help design tour routes through coffee farms. In his words, these farmers become our teachers. They share their local knowledge about how to work the land. UGA Costa Rica, as the center is called, also plans to increase the amount of locally produced food it buys. And when the center needs wood for building, it buys only wood grown locally without artificial chemicals. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can find more stories about coffee at VOA Special English.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Mobile phones are an important business tool for farmers in rural areas, but they also put a valuable educational tool in their hands. The University of Illinois in the United States has a project called SABO, Scientific Animations Without Borders. It produces educational videos that can be downloaded to cell phones. The goal is to help people in developing countries improve their lives. One video, for example, shows farmers how to make a natural insecticide from neem seeds to prevent insect damage to crops. The videos use computer animation. Some of the animated characters are a little funny looking, like a farmer with a long nose. But the subjects are serious, including a health video on preventing cholera. Team member Francisco Suferheld says the information in the videos is meant to be quickly understood. The information is digested in such a way that in 2 minutes we can transmit a complex idea. The team has made a few videos so far. These are available in a total of 80 languages, dialects, and accents. Professor Barry Pittendrigg says there are plans for more videos later this year. Purdue University in Indiana is using videos to promote a project in Africa called PICS, Purdue Improved Cowpea Storage. The aim is to get farmers to use special bags to keep air and bugs out of their cowpea harvests. The Purdue researchers have produced their videos in different countries in Africa. Crop scientist Jess Lowenberg-de Boer says this helps local farmers relate to them. The researchers did an experiment in Niger with a video showing how to close the bags. Professor Lowenberg-de Boer says the process is not difficult to do, just difficult to describe. Closing the bags is something that, if you see it, you will understand it very quickly, and most people do. But explaining it in words is quite difficult. The researchers tested the 7-minute video on 7 mobile phones. They wanted to see if people would share the video using Bluetooth wireless technology. With Bluetooth, files can be passed to a nearby phone even if neither phone is connected to the internet. In 1 month, the video had spread to 118 people in 50 different villages. And we think that this is just incredible impact. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For daily news and information, plus activities for English learners, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Today, we have a vocabulary quiz. We start with 2 questions about terms for plants. Okay, first question. What is the name for a plant that lives only 1 year or 1 growing season? This kind of plant is called an annual. Think of an annual report, a report published just once a year. You can probably guess the next question. What do we call a plant that produces new growth year after year? Plants that keep growing back are called perennials. So a perennial is the opposite of an annual. Perennials come back year after year. Now some questions about terms for livestock. What is another name for a male cow? A bull, right? Well, not always. A male cow is usually called a bull only if it still has its reproductive organs. If not, we call it a what? The answer? A steer. Next question. What is another name for a young cow? A very young cow is called a calf. But a young female cow, especially one that has not had a calf yet, has a special name. Do you know what it is? The answer? A heifer. Maybe you knew that. But here is a question just for our radio listeners. Can you spell it? Heifer is spelled H-E-I-F-E-R. Cows, like all mammals, lactate. Our next question is, do you know what that means? To lactate means to produce milk. Cows lactate for up to 10 months. In milk, fat rises to the top, but some people do not like to drink milk that way. So there is a process that reduces the size of the fat particles and mixes them all through the milk. This process has a name, a long name. What is it? It's called homogenization. Still with us? Okay, another question. Milk can be made into cheese. Some people like cheese made with milk from a sheep. What do you call a female sheep? The answer? A ewe, spelled E-W-E. Male sheep have their own name. A male sheep is a what? A ram. Rams and ewes produce lambs. A lamb is a sheep less than a year old. But what do you call the meat from a sheep over a year old? Then we call it mutton. Age also plays a part in terms for horses. For example, a mare is generally a female 3 years or older. But what do you call a female horse under 3? The answer, a filly. And for extra credit, do you know the name for a male horse under 4? A colt. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Pursuti.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Today we have a test for you, a vocabulary quiz. The words are all related to agriculture. We start with 2 questions about terms for plants. Ready? First question. What do we call a plant that lives only 1 year or 1 growing season? That kind of plant is called an annual. You can probably guess the next question. What do we call a plant that produces new growth year after year? Plants that keep growing back are called perennials. Now we are going to ask some questions about terms for livestock. What is another name for a male cow? A bull, right? Well, a bull can just mean a male cow that has not had its reproductive organs removed. If the animal was castrated as a calf, the name for it is what? The answer, a steer. Next question. What is another name for a young cow? That should be easy. We just said it. A young cow is a calf. But we have a special name for a young female cow, especially if it has not had a calf yet. What is that name? The answer, a heifer. Maybe you knew that, but can you spell it? Heifer is spelled H-E-I-F-E-R. Cows, like all mammals, produce milk. There is a medical name for this process. What is it? The answer, lactate. Cows lactate for up to 10 months. In milk, the fat rises to the top. But some people do not like to drink milk that way. So there is a process that is used to reduce the size of the fat particles and mix them all through the milk. What is the name of that process? It's called homogenization. Milk can be made into cheese. Some people like cheese made with milk from a sheep. Our next question. What do you call a female sheep? The answer, a ewe, spelled E-W-E. Male sheep have their own name. What is it? Males are called rams. A lamb is a sheep under a year old. But what do you call the meat from a sheep that is over a year old? We call it mutton. Age also plays a part in terms for horses. For example, a mare is generally defined as a female 3 years or older. But what do you call a female horse that is under 3? The answer, a filly. And the last question. What is the name for a male horse that is under 4 years old? A young male is a colt. So how many did you get right? If you want to take this quiz again, you can find it at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Old properties and empty lots in cities and towns around the United States are finding new life as urban farms. Echo City Farms in Edmonston, Maryland is located near shopping centers, car repair shops, and homes. The neighborhood is a working-class community. People do not have very much money, and they have limited access to fresh food in markets. Over the past 2 years, the farm has attracted volunteers from the community, like Marcy Clark. She schools her 4 children at home. On a recent day, she brought them to Echo City Farms for a lesson. Her children harvested rows of spinach, mustard greens, lettuce, Swiss chard, and carrots. It's important that the children understand the connection between the food that they eat, the soil, the air, the pollution, how all this is connected to their well-being, she says. Her son Alston agrees. You connect with the earth where your food comes from. You appreciate the food a little bit more. Margaret Morgan Hubbard started Echo City Farms. She thinks of it as a place where people can learn to live healthier lives. Our view is that what happens in a community influences the culture of that community. So our idea was growing food in a community and showing that you can have farms even in urban areas. Redefines what's possible in that area, in that community, and brings people together. Every piece of what we do here is a demonstration to show people everything about how to have a sustainable community, she says. That means not only farming food and raising chickens and bees, but improving the soil with compost made from food waste. 16 wooden bins are filled with worms. Their job is to eat the food waste and help make it into compost. Echo City Farms is an off-the-grid experimental operation. The farm gets its power not from the local electricity grid, but from the sun with solar panels. In winter, the greenhouses are heated using a geothermal system. Buried tubes pump air at underground temperatures, 13 degrees Celsius, into the structures. Vegetables can be grown all year. So once a week, all winter long, neighbors can come to the farm and pick up a share of the harvest. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can find 2 videos about Echo City Farms, including one about the composting worms, at voaspecialenglish.com.